going to discuss any conversations
That's
that
enough.
I have had with it.
And
You just put
your
words in
own
my
word-
mouth. I am not going to
No,
discuss.
I'm going to reveal your own words.
I am
Just a
not
moment.
going to
Please stop.
discuss
Please stop. This is
conversations
my
that I've
time.
had.
Literally thinks her job is to be the president's lawyer and to do whatever the president wants her to do.
We're working to secure our borders, remove dangerous illegal aliens, stop drug and human smuggling, and lock up these criminals as long as we can in our prisons.
What if everything we've been told about justice and transparency is a lie? What if the truth about powerful figures involved in the Epstein scandal is being buried deliberately? From secret meetings to hidden files, the shocking revelations about Ghislaine Maxwell's prison transfer and the mysterious disappearance of the client list raise a chilling question. Is justice only for the powerless? While the powerful are shielded from the truth, it's time to uncover what's really being hidden from us and why.
Mr.
So don't
Chairman,
talk to me. Don't insult me publicly.
this is so discourteous. This is so outside the committee's guidelines.
With the president, not the Department of Justice, and some of that is pending litigation, and I cannot discuss pending litigation.
Well, I'm not asking you.
Auto pen, I'm not going to discuss
All right.
anything that
Mr.
could
Chairman,
be or not be.
I
am never going to talk about conversations, advice
you
in
asked
any
for-
way.
were you asked
I'm
for
never
advice?
going to talk about discussions I've had
Because
or have not had.
you'll
I
remember-
can answer with the President of the
Yes or
United
no?
States.
Did you?
Thank you for everything you're doing in Madison to take all of these illegal criminals off the streets, and we will do everything in our power to
The
prosecute
role
them.
of an attorney general is one of the most important positions in government. It carries with it the responsibility of ensuring that the law is upheld, not for one person, not for one political party, but for the people and the Constitution. Yet, in recent years, questions have been raised about whether this role has drifted away from its true purpose. Critics argue that at times, the Attorney General of the United States has acted more like the personal lawyer of the president, serving political interests rather than defending the rule of law. This idea has sparked concern among lawmakers and legal experts alike, who see it as a dangerous departure from American history and tradition. When we look back at moments when the system seemed to falter, one of the clearest examples is the January 6th attack on the United States Capitol. On that day, a violent mob stormed the building, encouraged by false claims that the 2020 presidential election had been stolen. The rioters clashed with police, threatened elected officials, and disrupted the certification of the election results. It was an unprecedented event in modern American history, one that many describe as a direct assault on democracy. What stood out just as much as the violence itself was the silence from the White House. The president at the time, Donald Trump, did not immediately call for the National Guard, nor did he deliver a message urging calm. Instead, he remained largely inactive while chaos unfolded on live television. For critics, this lack of leadership highlighted the dangers of placing personal or political loyalty above the broader responsibilities of governing. Supporters, on the other hand, argue that the situation was more complex, but regardless of perspective, the absence of clear action on such a critical day remains a matter of deep debate. Beyond that specific moment, another theme has emerged in American politics: the use of fear as a tool to shape public opinion. For example, Washington, D.C. has often been portrayed as a city overrun with crime, yet data shows that crime rates in the capital are at their lowest in 3 decades. While it is true that, like any large city, Washington faces challenges, the evidence does not support claims of rampant lawlessness. What this contrast reveals is a broader problem in public discourse: the tendency to focus on alarming narratives rather than addressing real issues with facts and solutions. Some argue that this strategy is not about public safety at all, but rather about distracting people from other matters. Amid this climate, lawmakers and state attorneys general have emphasized the importance of defending the rule of law. Figures such as Senator Dick Durbin, Senator Chuck Schumer, and Congressman Jamie Raskin have spoken publicly about the dangers of eroding constitutional principles. Their message has been clear: the justice system should never become a tool of political convenience. To reinforce this point, They have highlighted the work of state attorneys general across the country who often serve as independent voices when national politics becomes too polarized. Several state attorneys general have explained that their duty is not to serve governors or political leaders, but to act independently on behalf of the law and the people. In Illinois, for example, the attorney general is elected separately from the governor, creating a structural safeguard that allows independence. This means the attorney general can represent state agencies while still maintaining loyalty to the Constitution above all else. This independence is viewed as critical for protecting the integrity of government institutions. In Massachusetts, similar sentiments have been expressed. The Attorney General there emphasized that the role is to uphold the rule of law and protect the rights of citizens, regardless of political affiliation. One example given was the collective effort to defend funding for critical medical research. When the federal government attempted to cut billions of dollars in funding for the National Institutes of Health, attorneys general from several states worked together to challenge the action in court. Their argument was not about partisan politics, but about protecting public health and ensuring life-saving research could continue. In situations like this, the role of the attorney general becomes clear, standing up for people's needs while defending established laws. This pattern is not unique to one case. State attorneys general have frequently found themselves stepping in to defend federal laws and programs when they believe executive overreach has taken place. This is particularly important because Congress, due to restrictive standing rules, often cannot bring cases directly to court to enforce the laws it has passed. In such cases, attorney general effectively act as guardians of the legislative process, ensuring that the will of the people, expressed through their representatives, is not undermined by unilateral executive action. Lawmakers like Congressman Raskin have underscored this point, reminding the public that when a president attempts to redirect funds or change programs without congressional approval, it threatens the very balance of power outlined in the Constitution. For example, if a president decided to reassign funding from the Department of Transportation to immigration enforcement without legislative approval, such a move would directly contradict the principles of separation of powers. Critics of these actions argue that even if the policy goals were defensible, the process of bypassing Congress undermines the democratic system. State attorneys general have consistently argued that if the president wishes to make changes, the correct path is to go through Congress. That process may be slower and more difficult, but it is essential for maintaining constitutional order. They stress that the issue is not about policy preference, but about protecting the system itself. As one attorney general put it, it is not simply about whether an idea is good or bad, but whether it is pursued through lawful means. This conversation about law, leadership, and accountability is not confined to one party or one administration. It reflects a deeper concern about how American democracy functions in moments of crisis. If leaders disregard established norms and institutions, the entire system risks losing credibility. When the justice system becomes closely tied to political interests, it weakens the trust people have in government. And once that trust erodes, it is difficult to rebuild. The testimony and remarks from attorneys general highlight an important truth. Democracy depends not only on laws written on paper, but also on the commitment of individuals to uphold them. It is about recognizing the limits of power, respecting the separation of roles, and ensuring that the government serves the people rather than the other way around. These principles are not abstract ideas. They shape how decisions are made, how conflicts are resolved, and how accountability is maintained. In reflecting on these discussions, one can see that the story is not only about what went wrong on January 6th, or about the controversies of one administration. It is also about the ongoing effort to preserve the rule of law in the face of challenges. History shows that democratic institutions are most at risk when leaders attempt to bend them for personal or political gain. But it also shows that resilience is possible when individuals within the system stand firm. The question of truth and transparency in government has long been a source of public debate. One of the most prominent examples in recent years involves the case of Jeffrey Epstein and the files connected to his network. Epstein, a financier with ties to powerful figures, was convicted of sex offenses and accused of running a scheme that exploited young girls. After his arrest and subsequent death in custody, public interest grew around the documents and evidence connected to his case. These files, often described as holding sensitive information about Epstein's associates, became the subject of intense speculation. At the start of his political career, Donald Trump himself suggested that these files should be made public. During his campaign, he stated that transparency was essential and that people had the right to know who was involved. His own FBI director later indicated that the public deserved access to the records. The Attorney General at the time even appeared on national television holding the files and referred to the so-called client list as being on her desk. These gestures created expectations that information would be released. Yet, those expectations were not met. Instead, the position of the government shifted. An unsigned statement emerged claiming that the client list did not exist in the way people imagined. This was followed by the decision to keep the bulk of Epstein's files sealed permanently. Critics argue that this reversal undermined the promise of transparency and raised questions about what was being hidden and why. Supporters of the decision suggested that the move was consistent with protecting sensitive information and respecting legal processes. Despite these explanations, polling shows that the public remains skeptical. Surveys indicate that more than 70% of Americans believe Trump knew at least something about Epstein's crimes before any investigation began. Only a small fraction of respondents, less than 10%, said they believed he knew nothing. Nearly 60% expressed dissatisfaction with the way the matter has been handled. These figures reflect a deep concern among citizens that important truths are being withheld. The controversy deepened with the case of Ghislaine Maxwell, Epstein's longtime associate. Maxwell was convicted of trafficking and abusing minors and sentenced to prison. Initially, her placement was expected to be in a facility with strict conditions, reflecting the seriousness of her crimes. But she was later transferred quietly to a low-sectary prison in Texas. The facility, sometimes described as more relaxed in its conditions, raised immediate questions about whether she was receiving favorable treatment. The timing of this transfer added to the suspicion. Just days earlier, Maxwell had met privately with a lawyer who had previously served as Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche's criminal defense attorney. Not long after this meeting, her prison conditions changed dramatically. For critics, the sequence of events suggested the possibility of a deal or negotiation that the public was not told about. For victims of Epstein's crimes, the transfer felt like yet another betrayal in a long series of disappointments from the justice system. Members of Congress, including Representative Jamie Raskin, demanded answers. They called for all records and documents related to Maxwell's meeting to be made public. Their concern was that the meeting may have been connected to an effort to influence Maxwell's testimony or secure her cooperation in exchange for leniency. Some even raised fears that she might be positioned to provide information that could protect high-profile field figures, including Trump, or that her transfer was part of a broader plan to secure a future pardon. But although, like a lot asked, the role of Pam Bondi, a Trump ally, also came under scrutiny. Bondi has been accused of working aggressively to keep the Epstein files sealed. Critics argue that her actions went beyond political defense and entered the territory of protecting individuals from criminal accountability. Allegations that she prioritized shielding powerful figures over seeking justice have only added to public mistrust. For those following the case, the sense of a cover-up is difficult to ignore. The sequence of events, from promises of openness to the quiet sealing of documents, from the unexplained prison transfer to closed-door meetings, paints a picture of secrecy. While defenders argue that legal rules and privacy concerns justify these decisions, the optics fuel suspicion. Each decision appears to benefit influential individuals rather than the victims who continue to seek justice. Even the courts have weighed in. In one recent case, a federal judge rejected an attempt by Trump's team to unseal grand jury records. The judge noted that the request seemed more about creating an appearance of transparency than actually providing useful information. Such rulings reinforce the perception that the justice system is caught between competing pressures, public demand for openness on one side, and political or legal strategies on the other. Openness scientists, like, for the families of victims, these developments are painful. Many were not even informed in advance about Maxwell's transfer. To them, it seemed like another example of decisions being made without regard for those most directly affected by Epstein's crimes. Their frustration is compounded by the sense that powerful individuals may be shielded from accountability while survivors continue to fight for recognition and closure. The broader issue at stake is not only the details of the Epstein case, but what it reveals about accountability in the political and legal system. If documents remain hidden and decisions are made behind closed doors, public trust suffers. When leaders promise transparency but fail to deliver, people begin to assume that concealment is deliberate. The concern is not only about one case, but about the precedent it sets. If justice can be bent or delayed for those with influence, what does that mean for ordinary people? Commentators have also pointed out that Trump's relationship with Epstein adds to the unease. Epstein himself once described Trump as a close friend for more than a decade. Though Trump later distanced himself from Epstein, the fact that their connection was acknowledged by Epstein fuels questions about how much Trump knew. The files are believed to contain names and associations that could damage reputations. The possibility that this is the real reason for keeping them sealed is a key part of the ongoing suspicion. Meanwhile, Trump continues to speak publicly about crime in Washington, D.C., often describing it as out of control. Yet crime statistics do not support this claim. Rates are at their lowest in over 30 years. Critics argue that the emphasis on crime is a deliberate distraction, a way of shifting public attention away from the unresolved questions around Epstein. They see a pattern in which alarming narratives are used to cover deeper vulnerability. Supporters of Trump counter that he has always been outspoken on crime and law and order, and that his remarks should be taken in that broader context. However, when the statistics are examined, the mismatch between rhetoric and reality raises doubts. The link between crime stories and the unresolved Epstein files is not explicit, but in the eyes of many observers, both issues point to the same concern: the manipulation of information to shape public perception. As the situation continues to develop, the stakes remain high. The promise of transparency has been replaced with secrecy. Key figures connected to Epstein face conditions that appear lenient compared to expectations. Allies of powerful leaders are accused of shielding them from scrutiny. Public polling shows widespread skepticism and dissatisfaction. And through it all, victims and their families wait for answers that never seem to come. In the end, the question goes beyond whether Trump or others knew more than they admitted. It is about whether the justice system is being used fairly or bent to serve those with power. If the files truly exist, then the decision to keep them hidden undermines the idea that justice is blind. If they do not exist, then the way officials have spoken about them in the past creates confusion and damages credibility.